Hello, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Zach Jurica and I'm the guy behind Nomadic Arts Archery. So tonight is Saturday night, girls are out and about, and I got some time to me to have a glass of wine in a peace and quiet. While I'm at it, might as well do the video that I keep promising for a while about the birch bark and processing and basically used for arrows. So birch bark that I collect last year doesn't look really promising. This will be part that touches the tree. This is the part that is on outside. I found it last year. Neighbor cut the tree, throw it into the lake, and collected the bark. It was fairly easy to work with, well, while it was fresh, but when it dries out, I was kind of stuck. So recently I posted some posts on Facebook and I got some answers, and then I worked a bit more, and then that's how we're gonna go about it. I'm not sure this is the way to do it. This is the way that I'm doing it, and so far it works fairly fine. Here's the, I don't know if you're gonna zoom in, if you can see birch bark up front, and where the feathers used to be I did cylindrical wrap. It is hard to see, but perhaps I can take a pictures and post it some other time. So we're gonna dive into that one. So let's move camera around and get about it. Okay, so what we got is birch bark in a lovely jezwa. What I did to it is, I heard I'm supposed to boil it. Then somebody, actually Yap Copper Dryer, told me not to boil it, but to heat it up in a warm water, not to bring it to boil. So here we can see how it looks and how lovely it curls back. So I'm gonna try to straighten it back and move this away. Okay. Oopsies. We can start scraping. Don't know how well you can see. Reason I insist on scraping, not on sandpaper, is because I don't think they would traditionally use sandpaper. They would most likely use a knife, so I'll go with that one. So you can see how the bark is changing the color. And mind you, knife has to be really sharp. I wouldn't use a utility knife like this because it doesn't have the curve. This one has a curve, and you can see where I'm collecting it. So I'll just do part of it because this really does take time. So I don't know how well you can see what I'm doing, but it has to change the color, and you have to get rid of the pulpy stuff, and this does take a long time. So if you do it right, you should be able to see eventually purplish color to it. It should be very thin. Also another thing with these holes, if you use sandpaper, you're gonna make big holes. Doing this, you will basically those holes will bend. And you see how lovely purple we got here. So like I said, I'm gonna do quarter of it because I have another one that I kept aside. So you see, it's not really hard, but not easiest thing to do either. What I learned from welding is that you always have to see what you're doing and always keep eye contact on everything. So here you can see lovely purplish color. It's fairly nice, and on the other side we have fairly slippery surface. So I'm pretty sure I have to go a bit deeper into it. So at this point it is about 0.2. I know my camera gonna show you backwards. I don't know why it does that, but that's what it does. So it is very thin and fairly nice in appearance. You can thin it even more, but I won't be bothering you for all night. So just move this aside, and I showed you what else I do to it. That's another, this is not traditional, these are my hair elastics. So I clamp it with a bunch of pieces of wood. I do the same thing to Stingray. So it stays flat, it's much easier to work. Since I already started on this one, I'll show you the next step. So in this case, I'm gonna eyeball it. It doesn't have to be perfect. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna get a ruler, which I have right here. It's not long enough, but it will do us just fine. So I'm gonna avoid these holes. Actually, I have to move it so you can see. And maybe put the light on. There. So I'm gonna avoid these holes and try to make it semi-straight. It all goes by eye. All right. So we still have holes halfway here, and it is pretty straight but not perfect. But you can always put double-sided tape and you're gonna stay much straighter. So that would be this part. Now that I got hot water to it, I'll leave it in, and you see it gets a bit more flexible. So it's a warm water, I'm not struggling with it. So I'll leave it for a bit, and that should do just fine. I'll put everything else where it goes. I'm always anal when it comes to cleanliness. Always put everything back. That's why it takes longer for me to finish anything, but that's why I do it. So at this point we came from this to this. And now what we can do, because we want bark to get basically memory. So what I tend to use is artificial sinew. I don't like it, but I have plenty of it. It is oily and it will not stick to glue. So for that reason only I'm using it. So what I'm gonna do now, I'll move this away. Okay, yeah. So I see I got a hole here, got a hole here. Those are gonna be cutouts. So you see the bark is fairly flexible. Also another tip, if you want to do arrows, don't have the chair with the armrests. Armrests tend to be on the way every time when you want to do something. So I'm gonna start wrapping it around. So we're gonna insert memory into the bark. So this is really exciting part, but that's how it is. And I'll just use up the rest of this, since I have, not gonna cut it, I'm gonna reuse it again. And at this point, we can leave it overnight and it will have some memory to it. Since I have one, if I can find it, there we go. This is the one that I did quite a while ago. There. And it retained the shape. So if I want to do the arrow, it's going to be much easier to work with it. Because what I found, if I use wet birch bark, then it dissolves the glue a bit. And then I will have a bubble somewhere, and that's not good. I tried to peel it up with a nail and the parts would come off and some parts would stay. Now that I went there, I found this one. This one is from the branches. So basically all you have to do is follow up a branch and you can go really thin. This one would be probably 2 or 3 millimeters. I noticed on one of the Peter Decker's arrows, Menchu did that in combination with birch bark. I'll try to find that picture again and insert it. What did I say? I don't know. Birch bark and stingray. So that's gonna have much nicer effect as well. And with this one, I scraped everything because it's much easier if it's narrow. And you can get really long strips of it. This one is probably almost a meter. But if it's dry and you touch it, it can crack. Like you see here. And that ain't no good. So we're gonna try to avoid that. So at this point, I'll clean up the table and we can start with the arrow. Alright, since I'm lazy to start with new arrow, I'm just gonna redo my old arrow. So we're just gonna pretend that I put sinew. So basically you're gonna scrape all the old varnish, and that will clean it up really nicely. So at this point, it is clean. We do have our birch bark, cherry bark, sorry. So what we're gonna do now is, like I said, we're gonna pretend we put the sinew. Everyone knows that. And we're gonna add some fish glue. Like so. And make sure it's evenly distributed. So you can do the same thing for the forward part of or back part. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so why I like this method is because I can slide it over, gonna line up end of it to back of my arrowhead, and then start from there. So at this point everything is nice and dry. So let's start from here, and you see what I'm doing here. I'll bring it up to this point, and this is where I'm gonna go harder on it. Okay, make sure you see your lines, because that is kinda important. So you want people to hardly see your joints. And you should press as much as possible. It should be really, really tight. So you see, it starts to give me a little bit of trouble, which is okay. So we can press into it and line it up just the way we like it. Remember, we still need our wet cloth and dry cloth. And once again, make sure you see what you're doing. So you see how I'm pushing with the nail to line it up a bit better. Okay, once again, let's see what we're doing. Bring it up as close as possible and tie it up. And this one should go nicely. So at this point, I can cut it straight. It's easier now than when everything is glued in and stuck up. There There we go, don't push too much. This is not strength competition, just making arrows. So I'm gonna do the same thing up front. So here I can follow the groove for my arrowhead. Okay. I think that's enough. And gonna tie down and leave it till the morning. You can do the same thing on the back, except I did stingray on this one. Yeah, that's the problem with the lights. If I do have a proper lights, it would look better. Speaking of which, if you like the videos I'm doing, might as well tell you while I'm cleaning up. You can support me on Patreon, because all those things cost money and I have no any use out of what I'm doing except helping people out. I started with the birch bark project and I'm stuck because I can't afford birch bark. So how can I make birch bark quiver if I don't have any? The one that I have is not that good. So we're gonna leave it overnight and let's see what happens. All right, good morning, and let's see what we did last night. So here's our birch bark, which is again nice and flat, and you can work quite nicely with it. So you're gonna pull it back, you leave it in a box where it goes. If you want your birch bark or feathers to be moist for a longer time, you can also add apple peels. I don't know how it works, but it works. So this one would be just a birch bark, cherry bark without any glue. So this one didn't have as much muscle memory as the other one, but here you can see what you should expect. So you're gonna put that aside, put the arrow aside, and here it is. This is what we glue up last night. Nice thing about the artificial sinew is that it goes flat when you tighten it, and it squeezes a bit more, and it doesn't stick, like you can see, too much to cherry bark. So glue doesn't affect it as much. So this would be our finished product. I do see gaps, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. We will seal it with True Oil. So I'm gonna clean gently with the wet cloth and dry it out. So here would be our final product. So I do see I didn't cut it properly, it's so hard to see, but here we can follow our arrowhead. and we will cut everything off that we don't want. Hopefully arrowhead gonna guide me, and we're gonna remove that. So that's a bit of a tricky part, but yet you can see how it goes. At this point you can use sandpaper or anything else that you want to smooth it out. You can use whetstone, because if they use whetstone for the stingray, then it's quite possible that they use the whetstone for these purposes as well. Remember, don't push. Let the tool do the work. Just go like you would do it with your nails. If you use power tools, you have no control over it and you don't see what you're doing. So I'm gonna leave it like this. I hope you can see much better. I should thin it down, this part, because I see overlap. I don't think that overlap is the problem, but it doesn't look as nice. So here I'm targeting only one area, and here I got another one. If you're wondering what kind of tool I'm using here, it's a sandpaper glued to stick of wood. So here I'm gonna go a little bit more aggressive to smooth out transition in between those two. And I still got a little bit of a shoulder. Mind you, this shoulder is very, very small. It's probably 0.1 millimeters, but I want to make it a bit smoother. And there we go. I do see a gap, but I guess that's inevitable. So I'm gonna let it dry, and after that I'm gonna put through oil, and let's hope for the best. Okay, quickly gonna use wool felt, but you can use, I believe, anything, and I'm just gonna rub it in. And this is how it looks. I'm sure you can do better, but I have to do this before my girls come home. Well, I hope you find this video interesting, and I hope you learned something. And if I do anything I shouldn't, or if you think you know better, or for any other reason, please leave the comments in the comment section, and I'll see you on next one.